did. It seemed more here, I guess because his rooms were so private that he could very freely walk about. And of course me, I wasn't a factor. I wasn't anyone he had to talk to, or he could ignore me at will, because I was there for him. So he would walk around down the hallway, even in and out of my room if he wanted to see what was in the floor or whatever. And so I would always see him chanting, chanting his rounds. And the one time I was in his quarters here in New Dwarka, and Prabhupada was chanting, and he was sitting, and I was just sitting in front of him, and he was chanting, and he pulled down his counter bead, and he said, he said, now I have finished my 16 rounds. I can do any damn thing I want. Flying with Srila Prabhupada was always just an exceptionally blissful opportunity, because then again you were able to see Srila Prabhupada outside of his devotee community that he had set up when he wasn't with his children, and how Srila Prabhupada interacted with people in the karmi world. And Prabhupada was always, of course, very lovable. Wherever he went, and on planes, they often showed him respect and would allow him. That was another thing, when Srila Prabhupada did get up in the plane, you usually didn't have anyone that would say, "Sir, sit down," because you just had that idea that you weren't going to tell him what to do. Everyone would get that feeling from him that Prabhupada was very much transcendental to everything that was going on. So I went in. Now again, Prabhupada was probably ringing the bell a while, because it was my job to answer it. So when the bell rang, nobody else, it didn't mean anything to his secretary or the Sanskrit editor, was Srutakirti, come here. So it may have been, I don't know how long Prabhupada was ringing it, but anyway, I got up to the room and offered obeisances, and Srila Prabhupada looked at me and he said, where were you? And I said, oh, I was Mangalarti, Srila Prabhupada. And he said, no. He said, your job is to be here 24 hours a day. He said, no Mangalarti. He said, if I need you, you have to be there. So then of course I always like to tell everyone that I was the only devotee in ISKCON that didn't have to go to Mangalarti. Whenever he would fly from one place to another, the last thing Prabhupada would do was, just like we were flying here, and of course about 10 minutes before you're ready to touch down, they turn on the fasten your seatbelt sign and tell you not to get out of your seat. So for Prabhupada, that meant get out of your seat. He did the exact opposite. So they would put the light on and say, okay, prepare for landing, and everyone get in your seat. So Prabhupada at that time would use the bathroom, and then he would put his tilak on. And then when the plane would land, very often coming from the last temple, Prabhupada was always given so many garlands from the temple that he left. So he would have maybe a half a dozen garlands, or 3-4 garlands on him, which we would put in the overhead compartment. And then when it was time to land, he would say, get the garlands, and I would get the garlands, and he would pick one garland which he would put on, and then he would say, and you take the others. So we would all get a garland. But Prabhupada was very careful about presenting himself as a devotee of Lord Chaitanya. And as Lord Chaitanya said, when a Vaishnava is a person who, when you see them, you remember Krishna. That's a Vaishnava. And Prabhupada would put his bead bag on and adjust it very nicely. He would have his bead bag centered, and he would fix his, what is it called? Sannyas. But yeah, he would always prepare himself very nicely, so that when he made his entrance, because he knew there would be so many, all his disciples would be there at each airport, that everyone would see the perfect Vaishnava, which of course, no matter how he looked, he was our perfect Vaishnava always. But he was very careful to do that. So yeah, the makeup, that is our makeup as devotees, is as much as possible to have a tilak on and dhoti and kurta. This is Prabhupada liked this very much. I remember when we went to Vrindavan, the first time in India, I think we were there for maybe 3-4 months. So by the second month, I remember being on a morning walk with Srila Prabhupada, and it was in Juhu. And Shama Sundar looked at me, and he started laughing. He looked me right in the eyes, and he said, "Oh boy, do you have jaundice?" And my eyes apparently were all yellow and showing that I had jaundice. So then later on, then of course everyone right away said, "Oh, you have jaundice," which is very infectious, easily contagious just by touching, anything. And then the next person touches it and they can get jaundice. So some of the senior devotees were saying, "Oh, you shouldn't cook for Srila Prabhupada, you shouldn't handle his plates because he might get jaundice. And we don't want that to happen." So I thought, oh, okay, and I went into Srila Prabhupada, and I was still massaging him at this time, and I went in and I said, "Srila Prabhupada, some of the devotees are saying that, it's better that I shouldn't cook for you or handle your plates or anything or touch you because I have jaundice and you might get it." And Prabhupada said, "No," he said, "that's all right." He said, "Don't worry about it." He said, "You go on with your service." Then he said, "You have jaundice?" I said, "Yes, Srila Prabhupada." I was so serious, about yes. And he said, "Oh," he said, "what are the symptoms?" Prabhupada, of course, and I'm like totally bewildered, covered over by everything he's saying. I mean, here was Srila Prabhupada, and besides being always in touch with Krishna and a pure devotee, he was a master chemist, had his own Ayurvedic facility, and he certainly knew everything about jaundice. But I wasn't at all thinking and taking everything, as I always did, at complete face value. He said, "What are the symptoms?" And I said, "Well," I said, "my urine is very dark, and your eyes get yellow, the whites of your eyes turn yellow," I said, "and get very weak and no appetite." And he said, "Oh," he said, "perhaps I have jaundice." And then, of course, he said, "For jaundice, you drink lots of sugarcane juice." The cure for jaundice, as Prabhupada always used the example about Krishna consciousness. We chant Hare Krishna to get out of that state. So, and similarly with jaundice, you drink sugarcane juice, which there in Bombay there was an abundance of sugarcane juice, and it was the fun part of having jaundice was we were staying at Kartikeya Mahadevi's place at that time, a life members, and so he arranged, and I was getting sugarcane juice a few times a day. After a morning walk, and Srila Prabhupada always would, they would let him out front there, and then he would walk into the side door, and then you had the foyer there, and then he would walk up the stairs. So whoever was on the walk, at least 6 or 8 people would come inside and just be chanting Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, and Prabhupada would be walking up the stairs just so regally. And the one time we were all sitting there and just looking and Jai Prabhupada, and Prabhupada would look at us. I remember it was Kirtanananda and myself and Kaladri with some of the New Vrindavan. We were all New Vrindavan boys. And Prabhupada looked down with a smile, and he had his cane, and he said, and he looked up the stairs. He was like halfway up, and he said, "I want to run up these stairs." He said, "And I used to run up these stairs." He said, "But now the body won't allow it." He said, and then of course he went on and he said, "This is how we can understand we're not this body." I mean, everything was immediate. It was an example in showing us in our young ways and saying, he said, that desire is still there. It's unchanged. He said, "I still want to run." He said, "But now," he said, "I can't." Of course, we know anyone that was with Srila Prabhupada on a morning walk, he practically ran on the morning walk. It was the most amazing thing. His gait, his pace was incredible. So that also was a bluff of Srila Prabhupada's, but he used it to instruct us about the spirit soul. So then one afternoon after lunch, he called me into his quarters in Dallas, and I offered obeisances, and then that's when he said so. He said, "Srutakirti, He said, your name is too long. He said, I'll call you Shruto. And I said, okay, Srila Prabhupada. I thought that was okay. It was so interesting because it certainly isn't one of the longest names the Prabhupada gave out, but you know, how he was, why he said it and why he did it was just, it was such a wonderful thing. And Prabhupada started calling me Shruto. And for the next few days, you know, he continued to look at me and smile and say Shruto. I mean, I can only imagine that he saw me. I was such a total, you know, incompetent, silly little kid, and Prabhupada found me amusing. You know, so he gave me an amusing name, which is also, Shruto is a Sanskrit word. It's a bona fide name. And then he said, do you take a nap after lunch? And immediately, it was whenever Prabhupada asked these kind of questions, you would get a little tense because you thought it was a test, you know, and like you had to give the right answer because you didn't want to fail his test, you know. Like if you gave the wrong answer, then you weren't a good devotee. So of course, and I wasn't at the time. I learned very quickly though with Srila Prabhupada that you took naps because his schedule, he stayed up very late, which I never did, and then I started to with Srila Prabhupada. And I said, oh no, Srila Prabhupada, I don't take naps. And he said, that's very good. He said, I'm an old man, he said, so I have to take a nap after eating lunch. He said, I have to take a nap sometimes. But it was just so wonderful. And I'm thinking, like, why is he, like, I had no question about what Srila Prabhupada was doing, but it was like he was explaining to me about his taking a nap after lunch. And I thought, it's just everything he did, it just made you love him more and more. Even this was all within the first week. So all these things were going on. And Prabhupada was just so patiently taking care of me and instructing me and even explaining his own schedule to me, which was, it's just, to me, it just showed such an amazing amount of humility. It was like Prabhupada had this humility there. And I often said with Srila Prabhupada, he would call me into the room and said, so can you give me massage now? And again, my job was 24 hours a day just waiting for that bell to ring. But even at that time, it wasn't that you walked into the room, offered obeisances, and he said, let's go, massage time. You know, it wasn't his mood. He would say, you know, can you give me massage now? And in the morning, it was like, can we go on walk? You know, can we go on the morning walk now? I mean, always the devotees were just waiting for Srila Prabhupada, like, for him to set the pace of what was going on. But Srila Prabhupada had such a marvelous way of always making us more and more attracted to him. You know, every word he said just endeared us to him. This is the place where these kind of things always came up. It was about the end of the world. People were always leaving New Dwarka. Even in, I guess, last year, another row of people left New Dwarka because the comet was going to do something. And at this time, it was Rupanuga wanted to see Srila Prabhupada, and he had me come, and we were in the room together with Srila Prabhupada. And Rupanuga said to Srila Prabhupada, I heard it said that Srutakirti said that you said that World War III is going to start. I don't remember what the date was. It was 1978 or 76, something, you know. And Prabhupada just, you know, furrowed his brow, and he looked at me and he said, did you say that? And I said, no, Srila Prabhupada. I never said anything about a war. Like, to me, it was, you know, and still it was like the furthest thing from my mind was, you know, I was convinced I was ever youthful anyway. I wasn't going to die. I wasn't worried about a war. So I said, it wasn't me, Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada looked at him and he said, I have never said any such thing. And then he said, they may say that Prabhupada said this, Prabhupada said that. He said, but unless you hear me say it, don't believe it. I, again, wanted to leave as his personal servant. And my experience in being with Srila Prabhupada, that he was never very anxious for me to leave, because he knew I was useless otherwise. And at least I, you know, rolled chapatis okay. I could bring them chapatis, and I massaged them decently. It was basically a nice, very good rub down. But anyway, I was back in Hawaii, and now I had a wife and I had a child, and I guess I was torn in so many ways. And I said, Srila Prabhupada, I want to stay in Hawaii and stay with my family. And I said I wanted to preach. I said I felt the need to preach. And he said, my preaching's not good enough? So again, he just, wouldn't give me wouldn't make it easy for me to leave. And of course, this is, I have so many regrets. I've done so many things wrong in my life. And this was another one. Of course, I had the opportunity to be with Srila Prabhupada. But like so many of us, when I left his personal service in 1975, I figured, he would still be here now in 1997. I didn't see the urgency that these are the last, these are the last minutes, this time. There's just so many days Srila Prabhupada is going to be with me, and I should just give up everything and surrender my life and just stay with him. Just like he said, you can't get that moment back. So, I got to experience that. I get to experience that every day. And so that's why I was very enthusiastic to come here, and I just wanted to talk about Srila Prabhupada as much as possible, because then he's alive with me. I can feel him. And through everyone that's here, I'm able to get Prabhupada's mercy. Sometimes Prabhupada would say there were very big problems. He'd say, if your mind is really disturbed, do you know what he would tell you to do then? Chant loudly. That's exactly what he said. He said to me right here, he would say, chant loudly. And he said, I do that. And he did do that. The things that agitated, if I can use that word without being offensive, Srila Prabhupada's mind were never material. But certainly Prabhupada became concerned about goings on in the society. And at this time, I remember right here, and that was in the beginning of when I was his servant, there was the Juhu project, and the Juhu project occupied a lot of Srila Prabhupada's time. He was very much concerned about it, that Krishna was able to remain on that property that he had acquired. He said the deities were there. And he said once Krishna was there, he said, I was not going to let that man take them off. And his disciples didn't always have the fortitude that Srila Prabhupada had. They didn't have that conviction. And over again, they would be ready to give up the project and think, we can buy another piece of property. They would say these things to Srila Prabhupada. Why don't we get another piece of property? This is too difficult. And we can do something else. We can do the project somewhere else. And regularly people were, after some time, literally defeated by the government of India, by Mr. Nair, in so many ways. They've just wiped out. And these were the things, when Prabhupada would get these letters and he would get telegrams, such and such has left, or saying, why don't we do this? And Prabhupada would just become so upset. And it would be in the evening, and you would see him in his quarters here, and he would be walking, pacing in the hallway through his quarters and chanting very loudly, very loudly, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. And he beads. Prabhupada would walk. When he walked, especially here, I remember just so finely how Prabhupada always walked, and he would have his hand behind him like this as he walked, very straight, and he would move his beads in his bag, and so he would be moving them and chanting, and he said that. He said, I do that, he said. If the mind is very disturbed, he said, then chant loudly. One devotee, it was in Mexico City, and I believe was the first sannyasi fall down. And he had gotten married and he already had a child, and he came to Srila Prabhupada, and he was so afraid of taking Srila Prabhupada's darshan. And he came in and he offered obeisances, and he said to Srila Prabhupada, and he explained how in Chaitanya Charitamrita, when Chota Haridas even glanced at a woman, Lord Chaitanya told him, go. And he said, so Srila Prabhupada, do I have to go? And Prabhupada said, Lord Chaitanya, he said, he can make the whole world Krishna conscious in a second. He said, but me, he said, I can't do that. He said, I need all the help I can get. So he said, whatever you can do, he said, now in the householder ashrama courses, he said, there's so many, when it would happen, whatever service you can do, you just now be content. It was so incredible. Even when sannyasi would fall down, he said, well, now become a content grahasta, become peaceful. That's what Srila Prabhupada would say, be peaceful and do service. And Prabhupada was just wanted to follow the orders of his spiritual master and spread Krishna consciousness all over the world. That was the west of Srila Prabhupada. It was everything was west of Mayapur. So Prabhupada took in the whole world. So whatever it took, Srila Prabhupada could accept it, and he could burn up all our impurities and offer that service to his Guru Maharaj. And I was massaging Srila Prabhupada, and a devotee came in, and he was very concerned. He was a senior devotee in the community there. And he said, Srila Prabhupada, he said, the leader here, he's not chanting his rounds. He said, I know for a fact he's not chanting his 16 rounds. And Prabhupada's sitting in. And he said, so how can we follow such a person? And Prabhupada just sat. And he said, Arjuna wasn't chanting his rounds on the battlefield. He said, there was a great war going on, Kurukshetra, he said. So Arjuna was busy doing his service, he said, so he didn't have time to chant his rounds. He said, so he may not be doing that, he said, fighting such a battle. He said, but still you should see it like that this devotee is doing so much service, perhaps he doesn't have time to chant his rounds. Another thing which was always you saw with Srila Prabhupada was he always asked us and directed us to subscribe in cooperation with one another and in following the chain of command up to himself. He always did this. If there's some difficulty in the temple, then you go to the temple leader, the temple president. If that doesn't work, you go to your GBC man. He very much wanted us to be able to work together that way. He always stressed that cooperation with one another. There was another time there was a devotee wasn't chanting his 16 rounds, but he was doing a lot of activity in the temple and a lot of business, and he was manager of the temple as well. And Prabhupada says, well, what is the use of his management? He said, if he's not chanting his rounds. So Prabhupada could give different understandings, and depending on who he was talking to as well. And that's one thing, especially in this environment and talking about Srila Prabhupada's pastimes, we have to understand him, just who he was with, just like myself when he was talking about chanting his rounds and finishing his rounds. And Prabhupada dealt with all of us personally. He said, everything is there in my books. All the answers are there in my books, and that's for philosophy, for all of the answers to our questions, that's where we have to go. But when Prabhupada was here with us, he was also very merciful, and he accepted whatever little service we could do, hoping that it would ignite that spark, and turn the spark into a flame. So he was very kind to us. I didn't have, again, when I was Prabhupada's servant, I didn't know a lot about anything that was going on in the society. I wasn't even interested in hearing so many things. I just was doing my service. So I don't have a lot of understanding about the whole Juhu project. But I do, there were different things that I saw, and how Srila Prabhupada was so much determined that this is where Juhu project was going to develop. And is what had finally happened when it came to an end. Well, it didn't come to an end. It came to one conclusion. We were in New Zealand, and I was massaging Srila Prabhupada. The reason so many of these things happen, I'm massaging Srila Prabhupada, are because if I wasn't doing these things, then I wasn't with Srila Prabhupada, so that's why I always sound like I was massaging Srila Prabhupada. And I was behind him, again, I was always behind him when I asked him questions, and it seemed like he was in front of me when he answered me, so that was I guess that's the appropriate position, right, is to be behind, always behind your spiritual master. And as I was massaging, and Tushta Krishna comes into the room, and he had just gotten a phone call from Bombay. And in the phone call, they told Tushta Krishna that Mr. Nair had died. Well, of course, Mr. Nair was, he was the big demon who was doing all these, creating all this disturbance for, beloved Srila Prabhupada, and putting him through so much difficulty, so much anxiety. And he was dead. So he came in and said that. So I was, actually, it's all wrong. I answered the telephone and came in and told Srila Prabhupada. And then I went behind him and started massaging him again. So when I told him, Srila Prabhupada just put up his hands and said, "Thank you, Krishna." And I was, again, me and my foolishness, I was thinking, ooh, somebody died, I was thinking, that's not a nice reaction. Prabhupada was all glad. So I said, I just kept massaging. I didn't touch it. And Prabhupada said, he was such a demon, he said. He created so many difficulties for me. I mean, you could just, like Srila Prabhupada just going through, and that's what, again, with Srila Prabhupada, like, when Srila Prabhupada thought about things, it was like he lived them. He was like living the experiences. Prabhupada it was like the eternal platform, like everything was happening as he was thinking about it, it seemed. And he said he created so much difficulty for me. And he said even Prahlad Maharaj says that when a snake or a scorpion is killed, that's good. He said, so he was a snake. He said, Mr. Nair, he was a great snake. But he said, he said, the last time I saw Mr. Nair, he said it was in Bombay, he said. And it was funny too, that's how Prabhupada did battle, just like, the great Kshatriyas, they would battle, but when they weren't battling, they were very cordial in the evening, they could speak together. And and Prabhupada, he would speak with Mr. Nair so calmly and casually, but he was happy to see this man die, and yet he could speak. When he spoke with him, it was just businesslike, and he was cordial with him. He said, but when I saw him the last time in Bombay, he said he was limping. He said, I noticed he had a limp. And he said, and Mr. Nair was a very robust, energetic man, he said, but when I saw that, I thought, he's going to die. So all this is going on, Prabhupada's talking and relishing the moment, and I'm massaging him, and I said, so now I got into it a little bit. I said, so Srila Prabhupada, I said, said he was a great demon. So does that mean that Krishna killed him? He said, no, he was not that great of a demon. But he said, I didn't care. And he said, in my disciples, he said, it was difficult because so many of my disciples didn't understand. He said they didn't understand. He said, and they thought, why is our spiritual master so attached to this piece of property? He said, but I didn't care. He said, we have money. We can buy property anywhere. He said, I didn't need that piece of property. he said, but as soon as we bought the properties and then we built the temple, which was just a little concrete piece, put the deities on the altar, and he said once Krishna was there, he said he was not going to be removed. He said, I could not allow it. He said, for myself, I didn't need anything. And it was just like everything just came together all at that moment, and seeing how Prabhupada just so transcendental, you know, in everything that was going on. I mean, that was a battle that went on for years, you know, for years. And I remember, again, not being part of it at all, but just seeing things at different times. Devotees, they would import devotees from the West. I remember Bhagavan. I don't know if you remember when Bhagavan came to Bombay, and you know, everybody was just, it was like you went to battle and you were licking your wounds. You would come from the lawyers' offices, and you could just see that people were devastated. Devotees, they just want to leave India. It's just like, let's just get out of here. You know. Just being in India was difficult in the early 70s, and then dealing with this in Bombay was impossible. And I remember one day Bhagavan coming in to Srila Prabhupada in his office and said, you know, I'm here, Srila Prabhupada. I'm going to take care of this. And he had, you know, Bhagavan was, he always looked neat and dressed in silk and all. And I just looked and I just smiled to myself and thought, I wonder how long this will last. Which, it's very, we were very bad in India, right? We always had that outlook on everyone, this kind of pessimistic outlook on everything there. And, but sure enough, I mean, it couldn't have been more than a few days, and you know, his nicely groomed hair was just kind of all over. It was like he was it was another war casualty. I also noticed in the evening where Srila Prabhupada would walk around, and he would be chanting, and he would be pulling down his counter beads like he was completing his rounds. And it was just such a wonderful thing to see. And he, you know, again, he said to me, he said, when I was a householder, he said, I would chant 4 rounds in the morning and then 4 rounds before each meal. He said, and in this way, I would get my 16 rounds done. And he said, and this is very effective, he said, because if you don't chant your 4 rounds, then you can't eat. So he said he practiced this process as a householder, and he said, so, you know, he would always say you can do these things. You know, it was practical. Everything was practical, and everything we could do. And one time, one of the most wonderful times was in Bombay, where Prabhupada just started telling so many stories about his childhood, and talking about his mother and his father and his sister and their interactions. And Prabhupada always talked about his father so fondly, and always credits his father for doing so much for him, as we, you know, all read and heard so many times. And is what he said that night in talking about his father, how he used to, he said, whatever I wanted, my father would give it to me. And then he was talking, he said, sometimes it would be late at night and I would want puris. And my mother would say, no, not now. You know, it's too late. And then my father would say, no, if he wants puris, give him puris. He said, so then she would have to make puris. He said, my father was like that. He said, whatever I wanted, I could have. And he said, perhaps my father knew. And then he stopped. So, and to me, again, it's just my understanding and being with Prabhupada, how I was. It meant perhaps his father knew just what an exalted personality Srila Prabhupada was and what he was going to do in later years. It was just very clear that's what he meant, you know. And it was just so nice to hear him say that. So Prabhupada understood, but at the same time, you know, pure devotee understands everything is coming from Krishna. You know, Prabhupada genuinely understood, I'm not doing anything. I'm not doing anything at all. And, you know, that's something, if we advance in Krishna consciousness, we can realize anything that's happening is only by Krishna's arrangement. Oh, and Prabhupada asked a question. He said, so, the devotee, he is simple or he is crooked? And And one of those disciples said, "Oh, he's simple, Srila Prabhupada." And Prabhupada said, "Yes, so the devotees simple or crooked, you're sure?" And he said, "Yes, Srila Prabhupada, he's simple." And he said, Prabhupada said, "No." He said, "The devotee is crooked." He said, "Just like me." He said, "I've come here and I've tricked all of you into becoming devotees of Krishna." I mean, actually, you can see, we come here to be happy, to enjoy in Krishna consciousness. Of course, and we can do that, but one has to give up everything to Krishna. So this is the trick Srila Prabhupada did. He tricked us in. Now, if you want Krishna, you have to surrender everything, and then you can have Krishna. So that was his trick. If I've realized anything, that's what I've realized, that without Srila Prabhupada, I have no life at all, no reason for existence. One of the things, again, going back to my youth and our youth, and I remember here again in New York with Srila Prabhupada on the Vyasa-san giving class, and I remember him doing things like that so many times and just looking at his watch and saying, he'd say, "Now it is 7:32, and now that's gone, and you can't regain that moment again. It's gone forever in eternity." And I literally used to sit there and think, we're eternal. Like, why does that matter? That's how, foolish, I am, and how foolish I was. And I couldn't understand, And he would say, if you waste that moment, you can't get it back again. If you waste it in Maya, you can't bring that back and be Krishna conscious. And, I was on the computer and I was writing that, and I just had this realization that Prabhupada's gone. Like I was there with him, right at his feet. And I was wasting all those moments. So that's what I want to get back,
Je anilo prema dana karuna pra.
Hare Krishna. So it is always very wonderful to hear from Prabhuji. Even after hearing so many times, Prabhuji is so inspiring, so intimate in his relationship with Srila Prabhupada. So we'll have are getting fortune to listen to his glorification today. We'll start. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnanam Janashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityananda Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharini Nirvishesha Shunnavadi Paschata Deshatarini Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasati Gauravani Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. So devotees had made a wonderful presentation. So I will just share with you, all of you. Yes, great Srutakirti Prabhu, personal servant of Srila Prabhupada. So Prabhuji came in Krishna consciousness in 1971. So his early life, Prabhuji was born in 1951 in Philadelphia in a Catholic faith, and his family. And Prabhuji was interested, of course, in religious, spiritual things. And finally, his search came to an end when he came across Earth. There was an Earth Day celebration in Philadelphia Park. And in that, Prabhuji met devotees. And so he got interested in Krishna consciousness, knowing about the Indian Vedic culture and all. So Prabhuji visited the ISKCON center there, and then he got inspired and regularly connected with the devotees, and then he got into receiving his initiation from Srila Prabhupada. So Prabhuji's earlier name was, as far as I searched and came to know, was Bhaktivin, Vin, Bhaktivin. So this is mentioned in Srila Prabhupada Leela, how Srila Prabhupada gave him initiation. So Prabhuji was, just a second, I will, yeah, yes. So Prabhuji was, yeah, Srila Prabhupada's secretary called him in Brooklyn Temple. Yes, in Brooklyn Temple, he received his initiation, and he was called as Bhaktavin. And when he came forward, then Srila Prabhupada asked him for regulative principles and how many rounds you will chant. And then he told, your name will be Srutakirti Das. Srutakirti means, the name of Krishna means one who is world famous. And you are his servant, Shrutakirti Das. Like that, Srila Prabhupada said to him, emphasizing. And then later, he received Brahman initiation as well. And the turning point came in his life when Prabhuji got this wonderful opportunity to serve Srila Prabhupada. Earlier, Nand Kumar Prabhuji was serving Srila Prabhupada. And then later, some changes happened. So Srila Prabhupada was assigned a new servant, and this was Shrutakirti Prabhu. So earlier, his first meeting, I can show you one photo. Yeah, this one. You see on the screen photo? This Srila Prabhupada was introduced with Shrutakirti Prabhu. He is a nice boy, and he can serve you like that. Acha, no, just a second. Stop, sir. Once, just a second. You see, Shrutakirti Prabhu and Srila Prabhupada. So Srila Prabhupada was surrounding and inquiring. And when Shrutakirti Prabhu came during his first day, that Maharaj was training him and how to serve Srila Prabhupada, how to cook. And whenever he rings the bell, you have to come like that. So Prabhuji got this training, and then Srila Prabhupada accommodated him. So in that way, Prabhuji was serving. And then Prabhuji served Srila Prabhupada almost in every aspect from 1972 to 74. Means always he was with Srila Prabhupada. As in the lecture, Prabhuji was telling, Srila Prabhupada told him, your job is to be here 24 hours a day. And that was it actually. Means 24 hours a day, there was only one job of Prabhuji, to hear the bell rang. And whenever the bell rang, Prabhuji would just run into the room and offer his obeisances and wait for Srila Prabhupada's order. And wherever Srila Prabhupada went, he went and did personal service of Srila Prabhupada, like cooking, massaging, managing, and typing, correspondence, everything. So always he was there with Srila Prabhupada. And the most intimate seva and most wonderful seva he was doing was massaging Srila Prabhupada, 1 hour daily. So in that way, Prabhuji got so much intimate association of Srila Prabhupada, so much he witnessed the activities of Srila Prabhupada. So much so that now his whole life, like what Prabhuji is now doing, whole life he is spending in enlivening devotees with Srila Prabhupada's pastimes. What he had personally experienced, he brings the devotees into that same level of witness, what he had personally gone through. So much devotion and love for Srila Prabhupada. And yes, whatever he followed, he dedicated his whole life. And of course, the quality of humor and compassion, his preaching spirit also. But to Srila Prabhupada, his whole life was like surrendered. So Prabhuji is now inspiring devotees with wonderful insights. Like there is a book authored by him, What's the Difficulty? Where he recounts his memories with Srila Prabhupada. And the main thing is, Prabhuji is not just recounting or recollecting his memories. Prabhuji is also telling us what lesson Srila Prabhupada wanted us to learn from this particular pastime, what he performed or what he said in that pastime. That is very specific realization Prabhuji is having uh, of why Srila Prabhupada did like that or what he actually meant for. So you can read this book whenever get chance. And then now Prabhuji is traveling all over. Prabhuji is currently living in Vrindavan and he is serving in HR department there, human resource department in Vrindavan. And Prabhuji travels all over many cities, countries to enliven devotees with Srila Prabhupada Katha. So, and other things like festivals, kirtans, and retreats, and so many things. So, two more incidences what I got to learn by reading from Srila Prabhupada Leela, that how his service had pleased Srila Prabhupada. Srutakirti Prabhu was like thinking like his family, he mentioned like in the lecture also that his family was in Hawaii and he wanted to stay with them, his wife and children. So, and he also wanted to preach like that. Some of the thoughts were going on. So Paramhans Maharaj came and he asked to Srila Prabhupada whether Shrutakirti should accompany you to India or we can bring Nandakumar back. You know? So Shrutakirti Prabhu was massaging Srila Prabhupada and he was waiting what Srila Prabhupada will reply. So Srila Prabhupada told that, Nandakumar is, I'm not very anxious to have Nandakumar, you know, better Shrutakirti continue like that. And in that way, Shrutakirti Prabhu felt very enlivened, very happy that Srila Prabhupada wanted him, you know. So, should we allow him to come? Like that, Srila Prabhupada was asked by Maharaj. Maharaj, yes, of course. But Srila Prabhupada first gave a pause. He wanted if Shrutakirti Prabhu have to say something, you know. He was massaging at the back, you know, but he waited for 3 or 4 seconds. If Shrutakirti Prabhu wanted to say something, he wanted to choose something. But Shrutakirti Prabhu didn't told. And so Srila Prabhupada told that, yes, he can join me. You know. And then Shrutakirti Prabhu got his whole encouragement spirit to again continue in Srila Prabhupada's service very nicely. So in this way, these are some of the pastime. One more photo I can show you how Shrutakirti Prabhu is massaging Srila Prabhupada. Yes. Srila Prabhupada is very happy. And Prabhuji is also very happy. So it's so wonderful, Prabhu. And it's a pure devotee and Shrutakirti Prabhu is so intimately serving him. So we cannot imagine the fortune of Prabhuji, how much dear to Srila Prabhupada he is. So in that way, Prabhuji spent his time with Srila Prabhupada. One special pastime I can share with you. Once Shrutakirti Prabhu was newly initiated in 1972, right? His Brahman initiated in Los Angeles in 1972. What happened was that the thread, Brahman thread, what Srila Prabhupada gave him, that got lost. Now Shrutakirti Prabhu was waiting what to do now. And so what he this is Apshagun, he thought, you know. So he told, what should I do? What should I do? So then what he thought that, yes, what Srila Prabhupada does, every Ekadashi Srila Prabhupada changes his Brahman thread. So what he thought that this Ekadashi, when Srila Prabhupada will all keep his Brahman thread, then I will take Srila Prabhupada's Brahman thread and give him new one. Means new one he will anyway wear. So then Srutakirti Prabhu was very determined to get that thread. So when Srila Prabhupada came into the room and after bathing and chanting his Gayatri, and then like what he did, he gave Srutakirti Prabhu his Brahman thread. And what Srila Prabhupada had done, each of the 6 strings, means there are 6 strings in the Brahman thread, he had broken off each string. But Srutakirti Prabhu was determined to get that, so he tied again all those 6 strings. Now I will chant on this only, like that. So he kept that, and he didn't mention to Srila Prabhupada. And then Srila Prabhupada, while he was taking his new thread, then he asked Srutakirti Prabhu that old Brahman thread. Srila Prabhupada told. So Srutakirti Prabhu, yes, Srila Prabhupada. What should we do? So Srila Prabhupada told, you just take that Brahman thread and dig the earth of Tulsi Maharani and bury it. So Srutakirti Prabhu thought, no, it's impossible. He thought in that mind, so it's impossible. And but he said, okay, Srila Prabhupada. But Srutakirti Prabhu didn't do that. So this is the only instruction Srutakirti Prabhu didn't obey. He didn't put that in Brahman thread. He voluntarily kept it. He was determined to get that Mahaprasad. So that is one of the pastimes. So we pray to the lotus feet of all these dear servants, Srila Prabhupada, who have dedicated their whole life and spirit serving the mission of Srila Prabhupada, so that we can also be blessed with such opportunity and serve Srila Prabhupada's mission. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. जय श्री श्रुतकीर्ति प्रभु की जय, श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय, गौर भक्त वृंद की जय, ताई गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल. Thank you very much, devotees, for joining. Hare Krishna.